The dust from the stagecoach still hung in the air when it vanished over the horizon, leaving behind a single woman, standing alone on the empty road to Redemption Creek. Her trunk sat beside her like an accusation, and the silence pressed in so hard it made her chest ache. Whiskey Larson stood frozen, afraid to move, afraid to think, afraid that if she did, the truth would finally crush her. She had come west, chasing freedom, but now the West had left her stranded, filthy, and alone with night falling fast. Her dress, once decent, was torn at the hem and stained with mud. Dirt streaked her face where tears had carved paths through the dust. Her honey-blonde hair clung to her neck in damp, tangled strands, heavy with sweat and grime from days of travel. The year was 1876, and the dream she carried from St. Louis had already begun to rot. That the stagecoach driver had dumped her at the crossroads without mercy when she admitted she could not pay the full fare to town. No apology, no hesitation. Just a shove of her trunk and cracked reins as he rode away. Whiskey pulled her thin shawl tighter as the sun dipped low, painting the Montana sky in burning orange and bruised purple. The beauty of it hurt. Wolves howled somewhere far off, their cries sharp and lonely, and she wondered if they sensed how easy she would be to take. A woman alone did not last long in places like this. She had learned that lesson once already, and the memory made her stomach twist. The sound of hoofbeats cut through the quiet. Her heart leapt into her throat. She turned slowly, every nerve screaming danger. A rider approached from the east, his shape dark against the fading light. Hope and fear tangled tight inside her chest. Help could save her. Help could also ruin her. Out here, the difference was thin as paper. The rider slowed as he neared. He sat tall in the saddle, broad shoulders steady, his wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. As he came closer, Whiskey saw the hard lines of a man used to wind and sun, his jaw dark with several days of stubble. He looked solid, real, and somehow dangerous, just by being calm. "Evening, madam," he called. His voice was deep and steady, smooth as river stones. "Seems like an odd place to be waiting." "I wasn't waiting," Whiskey shot back, lifting her chin though her hands shook. "I was abandoned." The man swung down from his horse with easy grace, keeping his distance. The animal, a strong chestnut stallion, pawed the dirt impatiently. The man touched the brim of his hat. "Name's Preston Hayes. Folks call me P. My ranch is about 5 miles north. Town's 8 miles east." He glanced at her trunk. "You headed to Redemption Creek?" Whiskey nodded, forcing herself not to sag with relief. "I was. I'm supposed to be the new schoolteacher." His eyes moved over her torn dress and dirty face, but there was no judgment in them. "School ain't expecting you until next week. I heard about you at the general store." "I came early," she said quickly. "I wanted to get settled." A sharp coyote cry cut through the dark, and Whiskey flinched before she could stop herself. Preston watched her for a long moment, then made a decision she could see settle in his posture. "Can't leave you out here," he said. "Not with night coming." He reached for her trunk. "I can take you to town, or give you a place at the ranch till morning. My housekeeper's there. You'd be proper." Her pride snapped up like a blade. "I don't need charity." He lifted the trunk easily. "Not charity. Decency. Out here, that's the difference between living and dying." The truth of it struck hard. Whiskey swallowed, the cold already creeping into her bones. With no better choice, she nodded. "To town, then." Preston secured her trunk to his horse and offered his hand. Whiskey stared at it, then stepped back. "I'm filthy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't touch me!" His blue eyes met hers, startling in the dark. "Dirt washes off," he said quietly. "Pride's harder to get back once it's gone." Then, gentle as if she might shatter, he took her arm and helped her onto the horse. He mounted behind her, at keeping space where he could, though his arms reached around to guide the reins. Whiskey sat stiff as a fence post, painfully aware of his warmth, the steady rise and fall of his breath. Lights appeared ahead, small and scattered. Redemption Creek. Wooden buildings huddled together like they were afraid of the dark. A saloon, a general store, a modest hotel. Civilization. Thin but real. Preston guided the horse to a 2-story building with a faded sign reading Creek Hotel and Boarding House. He dismounted first, then helped her down when she hesitated again. "There's a bathhouse in town," he said softly. "I'll make sure you don't have to be seen like this if you don't want to." The kindness undid her. Tears burned her eyes as she nodded. Her legs trembled when her boots hit the ground, and she nearly fell. But Preston's hand closed firm and steady on her elbow, keeping her upright. He returned moments later with a gray-haired woman. "This is Mrs. Wilson. She runs the boarding house." Mrs. Wilson smiled warmly. "Come along, dear. Back entrance. I've got a room and hot water." "I don't have much money," Whiskey whispered. "The school board covers your first week," Mrs. Wilson said firmly. "Now let's get you warm." Preston set her trunk inside. "I'll come by tomorrow and show you the schoolhouse if you like." Whiskey found her voice at last. "Thank you." A small smile softened his face. "Welcome to Redemption Creek, Miss Larson." "Whiskey," she corrected. His brows lifted, but he didn't comment. With a final nod, he rode back into the night. Later, sunk into a copper tub of hot water, Whiskey scrubbed away days of dirt and fear, and her body ached, but the warmth felt like mercy. For the first time in days, she felt safe. She closed her eyes, thinking of the cowboy with the serious eyes and gentle hands. Morning light woke her. Clean clothes, a hot meal, an envelope with money, and a note signed simply P. She didn't know if it came from the school board or his own pocket, but she understood the message. Help without humiliation. By mid-morning, Preston arrived to take her to the schoolhouse. In daylight, he was even more striking. Tall, broad, sun-browned, with laugh lines that didn't match his serious manner. He showed her the classroom, the attached cottage, the small life that was now hers. "It's mine," Whiskey breathed, wonder filling her chest. She didn't know it yet, but that moment marked the true beginning. Not just of a job or a town, but of a life she had never believed she deserved. The days before the start of school passed faster than Whiskey expected. She filled them with cleaning, planning lessons, and arranging the small cottage behind the schoolhouse until it felt less like borrowed space and more like her own. Each morning she woke with a knot of fear in her chest, and each night she fell asleep exhausted enough to forget it for a few hours. Redemption Creek was quiet, but quiet did not mean safe. She had learned that long ago. Violet Morgan visited often, bringing news of the children and stories about the town. She spoke easily, laughing as she warned Whiskey about troublemakers and shy students. Whiskey listened closely, grateful for the companionship, but careful not to share too much of herself. Trust did not come easily anymore. But Preston Hayes appeared now and then, usually brief and purposeful. Sometimes he brought supplies. Sometimes he only checked that she was settled. He never lingered too long, never crossed a line, but his presence grounded her in a way she did not fully understand. When he left, the cottage felt quieter than it should. On Sunday morning, Whiskey attended church, sitting near the back. She felt eyes on her, curious and cautious. After the service, a woman dressed in severe black stopped her near the door. Mrs. Piton's smile was tight and sharp. "I notice Mr. Hayes has taken a strong interest in your welfare," the woman said. Whiskey kept her tone polite. He helped a stranded traveler. That is all. "In small towns, appearances matter," Mrs. Piton replied. "Mr. Hayes has responsibilities. Distractions are unwise." Before Whiskey could answer, Violet stepped in with an invitation to dinner, rescuing her from further inspection. Still, the warning stayed with her long after she returned home. That evening, a package arrived. The handwriting on it made Whiskey's blood run cold. She waited until the door was locked before opening it. Inside lay a revolver and a letter from her uncle. The words were calm, almost affectionate, but the message was clear. He had not given up. He never would. Whiskey sat in the dark for a long time, the weight of the past pressing down on her chest. Running again would only delay the inevitable. She placed the revolver in the drawer and prepared for bed, knowing sleep would not come easily. School began the next morning. 30 children filled the classroom with noise and energy. Whiskey stood at the front, hands steady despite the fear churning inside her. Teaching grounded her. Each lesson, each smile from a child, reminded her why she had come west in the first place. Preston arrived at the end of the day to collect his nieces and nephews. Watching him laugh with the children revealed a side of him she had not seen. He was gentle, patient, and unexpectedly warm. It unsettled her more than she cared to admit. That evening, he invited her to dinner at the ranch. She refused at first, thinking of Mrs. Piton's words, but when his disappointment flickered across his face, she softened. The next day, a wagon arrived to fetch her. The Hayes ranch was larger than she imagined, solid and well kept. Clara Hayes welcomed her like family, talking freely and laughing easily. For the first time since leaving St. Louis, Whiskey felt normal. Not hidden, not hunted. Dinner was lively. Children talked over one another, and the men spoke of cattle and weather. Preston watched Whiskey with quiet attention, never intrusive, always aware. When they walked together afterward, the land stretched wide and peaceful around them. That peace shattered when a rider arrived with news. A man in town asking questions, claiming to be her uncle. Fear iced Whiskey's veins. She knew what came next if she did not act. She told Preston she needed to leave, to face it alone. But he refused, firm and unyielding. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Back in town, the sheriff confirmed it. Her uncle had arrived. He claimed concern. Whiskey claimed truth. The meeting that followed was tense and bitter. Her uncle smiled too easily. His words carried poison wrapped in politeness. When he hinted at contracts and obligations, Whiskey understood the danger fully. Forgery, lies, a trap designed to drag her back into ownership disguised as marriage. Preston stood beside her through it all, his presence a shield she had not known she needed. When her uncle finally left, promising this was not over, Whiskey's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Later that night, Preston knelt before her, holding her trembling hands. He told her she was safe, that he would stand with her, that he saw her, not as a burden or a problem, but as a woman worth fighting for. For the first time in years, Whiskey allowed herself to believe it might be true. The morning after her uncle left Redemption Creek, the town looked the same. But Whiskey felt different inside. The sky was wide and blue, the air crisp with early autumn, yet her chest stayed tight, as if danger still hovered just out of sight. She taught her classes with care, smiling for the children, keeping her voice steady. But every sound outside the schoolhouse made her heart jump. Preston came for her at the end of the day, as promised. He did not ask questions she was not ready to answer. He simply drove the wagon, solid and silent, like a wall between her and the world. At the ranch, Clara welcomed Whiskey with open arms and no questions at all. That kindness broke something loose inside her, and that night she cried quietly into the pillow, grieving not just what she had escaped, but what she had never been given before. The next afternoon, the second stage arrived. Augustus Henson stepped into Redemption Creek like he owned it. He was tall, heavy-set, dressed in fine clothes that did not belong in a frontier town. His eyes were sharp and cold, and when they landed on Whiskey, standing near the schoolhouse with Preston beside her, his mouth curved into a smile that made her skin crawl. "Mrs. Henson," he called smoothly. The sound of it made Whiskey's stomach twist. Preston stepped forward without hesitation, placing himself between them. "She's not your wife," Preston said evenly. Henson laughed. "The paperwork says otherwise." What followed spread through the town like wildfire. The forged contract, the claim, the threat. By evening, the church was filled with people for the judge's hearing. Whiskey stood before them shaking, but she did not bend. She told the truth about the locked doors, about the escape, about being treated like property. Her uncle tried to charm the room. Henson tried to intimidate it. Neither succeeded. When Mrs. Finch stepped forward and told what she had seen, the lies collapsed. The judge's gavel ended it. The contract was declared fraudulent. Charges were threatened. Henson's face twisted with rage as he was escorted out. It was over. The weight that lifted from Whiskey's chest left her dizzy. She barely felt the bench beneath her when she sat. Preston's hand found hers, strong and steady. "You're free," he said softly. The word echoed in her mind. Free. That night on the porch of the Hayes Ranch, the world felt quiet again. Not empty quiet, peaceful quiet. Preston sat beside her, the stars spread wide overhead. "I don't expect anything from you," he said after a long silence. "You've had enough demands placed on your life." Whiskey turned to him, seeing him clearly now. The man who had not tried to own her, who had never touched her without consent, who had seen her at her worst and treated her like she mattered. "I want something," she said quietly. His breath caught. "What's that?" "A future I choose," she said, "and I want you in it." He did not rush her. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he took her hands in his. "I love you," he said simply. The words scared her. They should have. Once, they would have. But now they felt like truth, not a trap. "I love you too," she whispered. They married 2 weeks later. There was no grandeur, no pretension, just the church, the town, and the land that had given her back her life. Whiskey walked down the aisle in a simple dress, her hair braided with care, her back straight, and her eyes clear. Preston waited for her like he had waited on that road, steady and sure. When they spoke their vows, Whiskey did not promise obedience. She promised honesty, partnership, love freely given. Years passed, the schoolhouse filled with new children. Whiskey's laughter echoed through the rooms. The ranch grew stronger. Preston grew softer in ways only she saw. They built a life that was not perfect, but it was real. 3 years later, Whiskey stood on the porch with their children at her feet. Preston rode in from the fields, dusted and tired, his face breaking into a smile the moment he saw them. But she thought back to the woman she had been on that road. Dirty, afraid, certain no one would ever look past the mess and see the woman beneath. She had been wrong. One man had brushed past the dirt, not with his hands at first, but with his heart. And because of that, she had found beauty not just in his eyes, but in herself. And that made all the difference.